It's an interesting concept, but try it out, and I think it does have a massive difference on how you hear things. And that is my top tip, is use knobs and use your ears to listen rather than your eyes to view what you're doing. As a sound engineer, one of the most important things that you need to know how to do is to use your ears correctly. Obviously, you are listening rather than looking at things, so you need to make sure that you understand exactly what's going on. So you need to train your ears, and it's very difficult to think to yourself, okay, well that's fine, how do I just train my ears so that, why is somebody who's a top professional compared to someone who's a rank amateur, what's the difference in their hearing? They can all hear the same frequencies. In fact, some of the time, some of the amateurs have probably got, if they're younger, their ears are probably better than someone who's in their 60s who's been a pro for all their lives because their hearing has deteriorated. So it's not really the quality of your ears, it's more to do with the quality of how you pick things and how you listen. So how do you train yourself to listen rather than just hear? So these are my 3 top tips on how to train your brain to work with your ears so that you can hear exactly different things and work out for yourself what's right and what's wrong. And then that can kind of train your ears up. Obviously, with all these 3 things, it is a matter of doing a lot of it so that it becomes instinctive and natural for you to be able to listen in a certain way. So my first tip, number 1, is listening environment. Now, it's if you keep changing your listening environment all the time, if you're listening on headphones and then you're switching to speakers, you've got 3 different pairs of speakers, you're moving around rooms, you're listening in cars, you're listening all over the place, it's very difficult to have one controlled environment. So you need a controlled space. Think of it in the same way as when you do a science experiment. You need to have a control. So that control for me is this room with those speakers, listening to commercially sounding records all the time in the same sweet spot, in exactly the same position every time. That way I have that controlled environment to know, is something too bright? Is something too dull? Does it need more punch? Has it got enough snap? Does it need some clearing out in the low end to make it a little bit more open? So loads of different things that you can think about, but unless you've got a controlled environment like I have here, then you know, okay, it's the same every time. And then the more stuff you listen to, the more you get used to how things should sound. More, if you're listening at the same level, you get to listen to how loud things are. So if you're always listening at the same controlled level, in the same controlled space, then you will know exactly what's right and wrong when you hear it, because it will stand out to your ears. So number 2 is there's a website called Sound Gym. Now Sound Gym does what it says on the tin really. It plays frequencies at you and you can guess what those frequencies are. It will play different curves and all sorts of games in there for you to then just use a lot. I found it really helpful. It's really interesting just for me to test myself. It's quite fun when a client's in just to see how good I am, or quite embarrassing as the case may be. But yeah, check it out. I've put a link below for it. So try Sound Gym. That's a really good way to train your ears up. So my 3rd tip, which is my top tip, is when I first started mastering, which is 25 years ago, there was no plugins, no computers. We just had to turn some analog knobs and listen to exactly what was going on. It was speakers and us with the equipment and a tape machine and a vinyl lathe. But what you had to do, you had to listen with your ears and go in increments with the equipment to then know exactly what you were doing. So you would add 1 dB and you would listen for that. So you're using your ears rather than your eyes. You're losing your sight in effect, which is good. And what you're doing is you're using the steps of the equipment to then know, okay, I'm 1 dB, I'm half a dB, and then your brain calculates that with what you're hearing. So what happens in the end is that you then know, oh, that sounds like it needs half a dB, that sounds like it needs a dB of stuff. Or if it works with dynamics, you then get a sense of the different release times and things. So what that does, that kind of just gives your brain an attachment to the steps rather than if you're staring at something, you're just going to pull it up and you're not really going to listen. You're just going to pull it up and then listen, rather than turning it, listening, turning, listen, turning, listen. And what you tend to do is put less on then, and it trains your brain. You have a connection between those half dB, quarter dB steps, whatever you're doing, with what you're hearing. Because a lot of the times people will look at the curve rather than actually listening to the curve and listening to what's going on. I was thinking okay, that needs some more top, that needs some more bottom, it needs a little bit taken out of there, and then I'll move the frequencies around so I can hear where it's taking a little bit out or adding a little bit in. And so that trained me to know exactly what on my EQ it was doing. Now you can do the same thing with plugins. You can get plugins that are stepped. You can get plugins that you can take the graph or whatever you're looking at off. I would suggest trying that as much as you can with different plugins, just to get an idea of what's going on without using your eyes, just purely listening to what's happening. I know it's not as easy because you do need to look at the screen, obviously, but I did need to look at the equipment too. So it is a similar thing, but it's about using your ears and not your eyes, and getting that connection between the two so you can actually hear those little tweaks going on in the speaker, rather than just thinking that looks similar to what it should be. So I would be looking at some plugins just for ear training purposes that are kind of retro-ish. So there's some Slate ones that are good. There's the Curve Bender on the UAD. There's some back stuff. There's a load around that are just knobs. Manly Massive Passive. Some of the Masalek stuff that's copied now on the Acoustica audio. So I would check some of those out and then just try and use your ears. Don't think, okay, this needs 4 dB, because for mastering that's totally wrong. But even for mixing, you should just be using your ears and trying to work it out in steps, rather than just drawing lines and looking at what other people have got on their tracks. I've never looked at waveforms and thought, oh yeah, I better copy that waveform. It doesn't work like that. Every music is made up completely different with different harmonics, so they're always going to be affected by different things. So it's very much about using your ears to work out what is that change. I hope you found some help out of these 3 tips. If you've got any good ways to train your ears, please put them in the comments below. I'd love to hear anything you've got. I always like to learn some new stuff myself. If you like this kind of content, remember to subscribe and like the video. And I've got a newsletter I'd love you to sign up to. It only comes out once a month. It's called the Audio Anoraks newsletter. It's full of giveaways of pro audio equipment, plugins, and discounts on those things, and loads of sort of tips, tricks, and things that I've seen around the web that I can point you to that I can't do on YouTube. So go to streaky.com. There is a link below. Sign up for the newsletter. Thanks for watching. Till next time. Bye.